Talk about Chelsea's chances of finishing in the top five.
Yes.
We need to get onto this because they have put a little three-point gap in there. We don't know what's going to happen between Forest and Palace, but with those games coming in, and you look at the teams that are left there, Arsenal with Liverpool, Newcastle and Southampton to come, and with that second leg against Paris Saint-Germain in Paris next week and that one-goal deficit, there are some really interesting games. And then Newcastle playing Arsenal in that game in a couple of weeks' time. Who knows what's going to happen with those two sides between now and then? And then obviously the Chelsea on the last game of the season is going to be really interesting to watch, I think. And when you look at all the teams in the mix, even the opponents who aren't in the mix for Champions League football there, you couldn't say with absolute certainty which version of those teams will turn up in those games. Because one, because we're at that stage of the season, and two, all those teams have had a level of inconsistency. Maybe bar Southampton, who have been consistently poor this season. All of them have had a level of inconsistency.
Yeah, I mean, for Chelsea to go to Newcastle, maybe Newcastle and Villa are the only two teams, and City, because City are really now putting it together now at the end of the season. But they used to being able to put together good runs at the business end of the season. Villa have won 12 of their last 15 matches, and they are absolutely flying. They've got to get that goal difference up if they're going to take a hand in it. Forest have lost their last two. They've got to win their next game. Otherwise, it's going to fall apart for them. Newcastle, 7 of their last 9. They're flying, but their draw at Brighton was a real surprise. And Arsenal
dropping 21 points from winning positions, especially when you've got the Champions League on your mind. But at the same time, I know we're going to speak about them, but like, at the same time, it's that's a tough running for Arsenal in their current mental state.
Where are they in terms of their mental state? I was at the game against Paris Saint-Germain on Tuesday, and although it was really loud, really intense atmosphere, there is a tension at the club at the moment, and it doesn't feel helpful.
It's the pressure of everything that I think that they're trying to achieve with Mikel up to this point, and this is. You know, obviously the league being won by Liverpool, and then this being the only thing left with... I saw him doing an interview going through the players that are first-team players that would have been playing. That's why he's so admirable towards the players who are playing now, because they are giving everything. And you can see after 60 minutes, Arsenal look to me like they're finished out there. And you're looking at the bench, there's not much coming off of it. But
are you surprised he played such a strong side? PSG didn't play Donnarumma.
I don't think he's got much choice.
They made like 10 changes.
Yeah, Kvaratskhelia didn't play, Dembele didn't play.
I don't think the choice for Arsenal in what he's trying to finish second and trying to stay in there. So he's trying to play the best team he possibly can to try and get that. And when you consider we've dropped 21 points from winning position. So that is something, again, in the mind that they can't seem to see that out, and that is a problem.
How have they ended up with so few players to choose from, do you think?
I think there has to be an assessment at the end of the season to say how have we... Maybe, but
they've got to have to look at that, Kels.
You can't have, for me, is it 3 hamstring off the bone? Like we know Emma Hayes, but I work with her, and she said if my player had a muscle injury or an injury like that, I would take that really personal. That's under my control. And I know that Liverpool went with Arne Slot because of the career longevity of his training methods for his players and keeping his players fit. And then for Arsenal, I get it, there's been injuries and I get that he has to play the same team, but I think there has to be a look within to say whether it's overtraining, undertraining, S&C.
Well, they're saying the manager. You're saying the manager then has to be looked at.
Yeah, because for me, Wright, everything starts with the manager, and if the manager can't pick the players, then the games and performances still fall on his head. So I think no player, as you mentioned earlier, is any good if they're not available. And would City be stronger if players were available? Would Arsenal be stronger if players were available? They absolutely would. So I think there's something that Arsenal have to look at there and make sure they keep everybody fit. And that's why look at Liverpool. you know, they have that. And that was interesting why they went with Arne Slot.
Kaz, what did you mean when you said Emma said that she would take it personally?
Because, so basically, going back to her training methods, particularly, she would train in a certain way that we would never do things totally maximum. Sometimes in games, then in training, we would do things over maximum, so we'd be going into games fatigue, but it would be because it would help us at the back end of the season. And if any player had a muscle injury, she would go away and do like a full look into it as like, why did this happen, and make sure she felt that if any player broke down under her guardianship, she took it was a crime to her. And because it was no good, you'd invested in this player, wanted them available in the team, it shouldn't happen. And look, injuries happen, but if it's someone's ankle's been twisted from a tackle or something like that, you can't do that. But for me, I have to agree, from like, if you're getting quad strains, hamstring strains, that's something that within a club that can control. And no player is good if they're not available. And that's something Arteta must be pulling his hair out going, but I can't have Kai Havertz, I can't have Bukayo missing that long. It's either a style, we're too intense and we're not training right. They have to look at that better, because that will what stops them winning championships. That's my opinion anyway.
Yeah, but based on your experience as well of how you know, Emma kept players fit right through to the end of the season. But in terms of qualifying for the Champions League through the league next season, it doesn't really matter whether you finish second or fifth. There are no qualifying phases now because of the new league system early on. But does it matter? I mean, look, we're sort of ignoring the Champions League, where they only have a 1-goal deficit against Paris Saint-Germain. I mean, this is not out of the question that they get to the final and even win the Champions League come the end of the season. And that, you know, that's quite a nice little aside at the end of the season. But in terms of finishing second, is that important to them, do you think?
I think it wouldn't be important to them if they got to the final and won. But I think that because they're in a situation now where, like I say, the form in respect of dropping points from winning positions is something that if they did have the players that he's talking about, you might be able to rest some players so as you can finish the season strong, because you want to go into that getting with momentum. And if you then get to the final, you want to go in with momentum, because at the moment the form seems like, if I'm Paris Saint-Germain at the moment, being able to rest 10 players, I'm probably looking forward to Arsenal coming. Hopefully, you know, obviously Partey's going to be back, Declan then pushes forward, Marino play. Maybe that changes the whole the whole dynamic of everything else. But then again, you're still going to have the energy, the output, which Arsenal at the moment, especially when you look at like the people, and he doesn't make excuses for it, the players that are not playing, and then the players that he has got to come on at certain times in the game, you do feel that it is a really, really tough mountain they're climbing, especially like he said, the players are doing brilliantly just to get to it. And all that with the pressure of trying to win the league off of Liverpool, trying to stay in the Champions League, with the injuries, with everything what's going on, and trying to get to the Champions League final. I think they're under a lot of pressure, a lot of fatigue, and we're going to really learn a lot about them in the next next game.
Yeah, it's going to be huge. The game against Paris Saint-Germain in midweek, in Arsenal season may well be resting on that. Ice-cold Palmer on target for Chelsea from the spot, but a great all-round performance from him. It means that Chelsea are 3 points clear of Forest and Villa. Chelsea in fifth. Remember, Forest play at Crystal Palace this evening as well, but momentum not really with Forest at the moment. Then it's Newcastle level on points with Chelsea, Manchester City on 64 points, closing the gap on second place Arsenal with 67 points as things stand. But let's start by talking about that Chelsea performance. And we alluded to it later. It was a much changed Liverpool side. They still had to do it, Chelsea, and they still had to kind of ask for that level of performance from Cole Palmer, who delivered in a way that he might have been doing in patches over the last 12 games, but over the last 12 Premier League games, no goals and only 2 assists. Yesterday was not like that. It wasn't that kind of game for him at all.
You call it, but Liverpool champions. You know what I mean? Even when you look at Liverpool's goals and the way they concede it, it's just not Liverpool. So you can see that their minds are not focused on what they're doing, but you can't take anything away from Cole Palmer's performance, of course. But, you know, the thing with Cole Palmer, which he's going to have to make sure that he gets into his game and ingrained in his game, is the consistency, because we saw this at the start of the season, then it dropped off. I think a lot of it dropped off with the injury to Jackson and that person to hit on the long and those kind of balls what he plays. But in this particular game, yeah, he was like we know, he performed like we know he can perform. Again, it comes down to consistency. All of a sudden now, hearing Cole Palmer, and brilliant, yeah, but like you need that consistency, and that's what I'm sure that he'll be thinking about towards the end of the season.
I was about to say that it's interesting because he left City to play more regularly. But if he'd have stayed at City, he would have had a more demanding coach. Because Maresca needs him, whereas Pep has got so much talent, he doesn't need him. And if he doesn't meet that standard, that demands that consistency from him, then he doesn't play. So, for example, we haven't seen as much of Phil Foden because he hasn't been at that standard after a double Player of the Year award season last time around when he was absolutely magnificent. And I think it's funny because Palmer carried Chelsea on his back to get them into Europe, and now they look as though they're going to win a trophy. They're very close to the final. Yeah. And yes, he hasn't scored those goals, but he's almost a victim of Chelsea's inability to supplement £1 billion squad with 2 strikers. You know, had they bought strikers last summer, that pressure wouldn't be on him. But because they haven't bought strikers, that 12-game sequence that you mentioned is suddenly much more pronounced because he's the man they rely on to get the goals, and he shouldn't be. It should be the case that you're looking at the 2 strikers. And even if you lose one of them, as they had done with Jackson this season, you would still have the other one that you could rely on, but Chelsea's recruitment hasn't addressed that. I just think, though, that with Palmer, there is a good player, there is pure gold, and I think over time, as the pressure kind of comes off him, we'll see more of a player.
And I think the point that you made about the demands that the manager places on him is a really interesting one, particularly in the light of what Cole Palmer was talking about, the reaction there's been to that dip in form of his.
Obviously, I went, 3 months without scoring, but, you know, it just gives me more motivation and more fight to do well, not just for myself, but for my team. Like, you know yourself, social media nowadays is just full of idiots, basically, innit? Do you know what I mean? Like the trolls and that or whatever, so I don't pay no attention to that. But to score today, I'm happy, but, you know, it's only one and I've got to keep improving and trying to reach new levels.
I mean, it's that point again about social media reaching a player even though they're not looking at it. He's like, it doesn't affect me, but I hear about it, and actually it does affect me because it seems to have motivated him a bit. But it's interesting, and it picks up on what Darren was saying about where that motivation comes from. So if he was at Manchester City, then Pep Guardiola would have been a huge part of that. He would have been on top of him and he would have been demanding from him. Whereas because Maresca needs him, he maybe is a little bit more kid gloves with him. But it's where the motivation comes from.
Yeah, I disagree, because he did an interview where he was like, the manager might not be putting the pressure on him, but he knows the rest of his team need him. And he said, I'm letting my team down. And I think...
He said that yesterday.
Yeah,
he said that he feels that pressure.
Pep, sometimes I think this will be better for his career than maybe being left out of a squad from Pep, because there's no greater experience for a player to play through a difficult moment. And I don't think it's been a difficult moment. I've seen him, watched him closely. I watched him last week live. I think he's been doing fine. I think he's too good for Chelsea, and I don't think the rest of the team give him the balls that he gives other people. And yes, he hasn't got the goals, but he's probably had an injury, maybe for the first time, missed games. Jackson missed it. Madueke missed games. So the whole of that front line, and what teams are doing now, they've worked Chelsea out, they sit deeper, so Cole has to pick the ball up deeper, and then he has to take an extra touch. And yes, and then maybe it's kind of manifested into maybe not being as sharp at the start of the season. He's got 15 goals, 8 assists, he's been out injured, and that goal return, the assist return, and for a young player to be in his second full season, I'd say, in the Premier League, I think it's brilliant. And I think this little drought will do him the world of good for the rest of his career. It's better than being sat on a bench and not being picked.
Learning resilience through practice is more
Sorry,
helpful
I was going
than
to say, go on, Dave.
Well, I actually agree with what you're saying. I just think that if you look at what he has actually said, he is aware of that criticism. Yeah. He's aware of that pressure. And sometimes you have to listen to what a player's saying to you. And he's saying that as you said, he's had terrific numbers, and his play hasn't gone down. He's just not added those goals to it. But that doesn't change the perception of him as a player. But that's a reasoned, cogent analysis, and it's very different to what you get on social media, where lots of people just want to have a pop. Yeah. And as a young player still learning the game, you should be shielded from that, as he would be if he were at City. Yeah. But you guys, you played the game, so you know that if you're in a difficult moment, some people do want to play through it. So I totally take that point.
But even going back to what you said, I came off social media ages ago. It all gets to you. It finds a way. People tell you, people send it to you. And so even though you can...
That's the thing, people do send it to you.
It gets to you, and even though he might not have seen everything, there will be elements. But I think fair play to him to step up to take that penalty yesterday, because it's still a difficult moment for him, and I really like Cole, and I know we all do, but I think this is amazing, and I think he's done really well. And I think coming off, when you get an injury mid-part of the season, it's so difficult to come back and to get back to the levels of where everybody expects him, where everyone's carrying. I think it's so hard for a young player. So I actually think he's done incredibly well.
Just to add one bit to that, because, you know, I am here as a representative of the media. And when you are a big player and you create the impression that Palmer has done, there are pieces that end up in the print media, in the digital media, what's happened to Cole Palmer. And not because they want to criticise him, more because they are used to a level of game-changing goals, exhilarating performances, the kind of thing that he produced during his first season at Chelsea, where he justified the £45 million outlay. So there is that surprise that it stopped. And so there are questions that are asked about why has it stopped? What's not helping him? What's to do with the climate? Is it to do with the manager? And all those questions that we're discussing here come out. That's not criticism of him, but it's what comes with being a seriously good player, which is what he is.
And those top-line numbers may have dropped off, but as you've both kind of alluded to from slightly different angles, one is that he never really dropped off that far in terms of performances. And as you said, he didn't really improve that much yesterday in terms of performances, but he does have the involvements. But the performances have probably done this, where the numbers have done that.
I think that what you have to say about what Karen, I think Karen mentioned about him being, or was it you, Darren, about being at City and probably not getting these opportunities. The best thing for him to have done was move from City, go to a Chelsea. Yes, no one expected him to be the main man so quickly. You have to expect some form of drop-off in what he's doing, but he's standing in his level. When you watch him in the game, people not making the right moves anymore, people putting him under more pressure because of obviously how good he is. And like I say, that's where the consistency would come in. If he stayed at City, he wouldn't even be at this level yet, because he wouldn't have been able to play through this. So then next season, you look at someone like Cole Palmer, you think, oh, he's learned from that last season. He's still affecting games, even though he's been... And that is why you leave a City where you're not playing.
Yes.
And you come to a Chelsea where you can get a chance. And then you look at Foden, as great as Foden has been, like you rightly said, player of the season, Foden's dropped off and he's out. So what would Cole Palmer would have had to do to be at City and play that consistently for that? It's almost impossible. So you need to come to a Chelsea in that. You need to come somewhere like that. Go through this period, Kels, and then you find it. I
love that idea of being able to play through that fallow period, and yet being at a team where you're allowed to do that as well is quite a tricky balance, because you're a player who's here and a team whose demands are here, but you should be allowed to.
And you know what?
But that's my point about Chelsea not helping him, because and it's not a criticism of Chelsea, but had they had the strikers who would be scoring those goals that would turn the matches, there'd be less of a focus on him and on Chelsea.